Here's something you didn't know. I'm lazy. Surprise, surprise. So I'm always looking for shortcuts, even though I know shortcuts are not the way to go most of the time, but I paint minis from time to time, and when I'm done painting them, I take pics of them to post on social media. Mostly, you know, just to keep a record for myself, because I don't get too many views on social media anyway, but it's nice to have a little repository of all the pictures I've taken that is accessible, you know, wherever I am on my phone, so I can show off to people that don't know me and wonder what it's like being a dork. Otherwise, all that's really happening with a finished miniature is they just go in the display case or maybe in one of the miniature storage boxes in the back, you know, until we need them for a game or something, which of course we all know is a rare occurrence. Now, every time I got to take some photos of a mini, I got to rearrange my apartment and get out a light or two lights and a backdrop and set everything up. And I have to get like a folding table out, and I don't have extra lights I can just leave set up to take a photo of a finished miniature every couple of weeks. So it's always a pain. Now, a few years ago, I bought one of these little cheap Amazon soft boxes, and it still requires lights on the outside of it to really work right, and it's floppy, and it doesn't hold up well, and it's small, so I can't get the miniature far enough away from the background. You know, so all in all, it's just as much of a pain as any other setup I've been doing. Optimally, what I've been wanting is some sort of very quick and easy lighting setup that I could slap down on one of my work tables at the drop of a hat, and, you know, just have soft light ready to go. That would be great. So then I was watching this YouTube video of a comic book artist drawing some comic book art, and I saw this thing she was working with, and I was like, wait a minute, what is that? I didn't know they made things like this. So I went to searching for light boxes, because that's what those devices were traditionally called. A light box. It's just like a box with light bulbs in it that with a piece of plastic diffusion on it or whatever. Animators would use this, or other artists to be able to trace something on the light box, right? Put down a sketch and then put another piece of paper over that, and then the lights come through the bottom and they can see it. So now apparently they make LED light panels, which I know they make light panels for film production and other things. You get flat LED panel lights. I just didn't know they made it in a form factor and were being sold as light boxes. So it's super thin. Now, it's not very bright. Anyway, I think I found my dream of a super quick and easy setup that with some DIY time and effort cost me around $25. And it actually achieved some pretty surprising results. Greetings, good humans, and welcome to Tabletop Alchemy, where sometimes we DIY something that actually works as intended, which I know is a surprise. And we thank our patrons for supporting such successful shenanigans. I've never been able to say that before. Successful shenanigans. Okay, let's get one thing straight at the beginning here. This DIY thing we're setting up today was a really good deal money-wise for me, because when I purchased these two light panels, I went to order one. It was on sale for 50% off. So it was being marketed as a $20 light panel, but they were on sale for $10. So I ordered two of them for $20 with free shipping. Now, I understand that this price is probably not currently the price, but that said, even $40 for two of these things, which I have two of them now, right? And I keep saying that, but even $40 for two of these is a pretty good deal because of how they work and what they bring to the table. So, when we take pictures of our minis, we just want two things, usually. Nice, full, soft light, and the ability to put whatever we want as the backdrop. Now, there are tons of ways to take a picture of a miniature, of course. This is just one of them. Now, when we take the sample pics to check out what this setup results in, I used my regular full-frame photography camera. It's a Sony a7 III. But then I also thought I should take a pic or two with my, super fancy and modern iPhone 12. Yes, I'm wealthy, I know. I've never taken stage shots of my miniatures with my phone, because I was always like, why would I do that when I have a great, awesome full frame camera with a macro lens and all that stuff? But after this experiment, I don't know, I might use the phone a little more. So the central pillar of this DIY lighting setup are these two LED panels, which again are sold as light boxes. They call it a LED adjustable illuminated tracing light box. But again, like I said, I can't stress this enough. They're not super bright. It's not like you could, buy one of these instead of, say, $1,000 cinema light panel if you're trying to make a movie or something, then you would use that instead, because these aren't gonna, they don't put out a lot of light. Now, I was pretty sure that because they're so cheap that the color quality of the light would be, what should we call it, garbage. So when you buy light bulbs, you can, especially LED lights and sometimes fluorescent lights, you can find a CRI rating, which is a color something index. I forgot what the R is for. I could look it up, but I'm lazy. I already told you that. Don't act surprised. Go get a donut. Okay. What I'm getting at is that there's a CRI index that's redundant. It's color rendering, I think, is what the R stands for. I don't know. Again, I'm not going to look it up. So I'm gonna be lazy. I've lost track of the narrative here. You can buy light bulbs that have a CRI rating. Basically, if you wanted very true, accurate color rendering, you want a CRI of like 95 plus. My guess is that these things are probably down in the 40 range. You'll never see a CRI rating of 40. It's pretty much, if they don't show a CRI index of like an 85, or you won't find any indexes stating less than that, because why bother? It's going to be a garbage light thing. Anyway, we'll see how that works. There's some method to the madness of my thinking of why I would go with these cheap lights, even though they're going to have crap color quality. I typically shoot photos in RAW format, right? So when you shoot photos in RAW, you have a very lot. You got a lot of leeway for shifting the raw image, the raw file data, so you can change the color temperature at like a base core level of the photograph image without, it hasn't been baked in yet, so to speak. I don't know. There are tons of videos on RAW and stuff. I can't get into that stuff right now. Anyway, I figured, these panels were cheap enough, again, to give them a shot, knowing I could really tweak the color balance in post in the RAW format in Photoshop. Right now, for the DIY part of this deal. So we're going to have these two light panels, and I just need some way to hold them up on a table. Now, sure, I could probably just lean them on something like a bottle of water or a shoebox or whatever, just something else I'd have to put on the table, right? But I was like, I want to be able to move them around independently of each other, and I want whatever this holder thing is to have like a small footprint, and I want it to be easy to build. And so before I got the panels in the mail, I was just sort of guessing at how much they might weigh and how thick they were, etc. Even though I probably could have gone and looked that stuff up. But then I thought, well, I have a box of BBs, like, little metal balls, right? And I use these inside of mugs on my desk to hold my brushes and stuff, and they just, they're heavy is what I'm getting at. I've used BBs to sort of weigh things down, right? And I thought, that's cool. I could probably build a small box, just open topped, and I could just pour some BBs inside, and that would weigh it down enough to hold up these panels. And if I attached to the box would be a slot built out of another wall in this little thing I'm going to make to hold the light panel up, right? So I sketched up a quick idea and ran it by my buddy Hoffman, who's good at like building small things and stuff. He helped me out with a suggestion for triangular gussets on the side opposite the box, the bracing essentially for the second little wall that's going to form the slot that the panel would stand in. It's a great idea. So I drew that into my little diagram, and I decided that the box would be 4 inches wide, the walls would be 2 inches tall, and so the slot was also 2 inches tall and 4 inches long. I figured that would be tall enough to keep the panel from being able to, like, if you put it in the slot, it won't be able to like slip out, because it'll have... We're going to look at this in real life here when I build it, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So I figured I'd just build one of these things out of Sintra, because I like that stuff better than foam core or cardboard. But I will say that this simple little design would totally work out of one of those other materials, cardboard or foam core or whatever. So I cut a chunk of Sintra 4 inches wide, and I cut the floor, or the bottom of the box, to 4.5 inches long. And I drew some lines on it to denote where the walls would go and where the gap or the slot would be for the light panel. I made that about a 1/2 inch. And then I trimmed out some 2x4 inch pieces to be the long walls. And then I cut out a 2 inch square and then sliced that diagonally to create the triangular gussets. Then, of course, it's time to get on the most fun part of the project, most fun part of any project, hot glue. Come on now, you know it's fun to hot glue stuff. So the other reason I use the hot glue is because it's fast, obviously, and it locks up Sintra pretty nicely. We actually used to use Sintra and hot glue to make mold boxes for pouring like RTV rubber into that would cure into, you know, you could mold something, right? And Sintra and hot glue was like the go-to thing for that because it just works. The hot glue sticks to that stuff really good. So then I decided to check the width of the light panel, and it's, like I said, way thinner than I thought they were going to be. I had created the slot, like I said, at about a 1/2 inch wide, thinking the light panel might be a 1/4 inch wide, but it's barely like 1/8 of an inch wide. So I just decided to glue down the secondary slot wall on the inside of the line instead of on the outside of it, which would, you know, kind of like, you know, narrow up that slot a little bit. Now, are you noticing what I noticed? Yeah, those little holder things don't seem to need any extra weight like the BBs or anything like that. These light panels are so thin and light that the 2 inches of platform on either side of them seem to hold them up just fine. So I've got the, you know, I built the boxes. They're there now. If I ever feel like I need to weight it down with something, I can use those. But I think for our current experiment today, I'm not going to put BBs in there. We're just going to let it roll. So let's do the thing we're trying to do, right? Let's take a photo with these things. Now, the first thing I'm going to put on the table is my collapsible DIY airbrush backdrop. It's my own personal, unfoldable airbrush booth. It doesn't have any fans or anything in it. I taped this up out of foam core like 6 years ago, and it works to just keep overspray off anything here in the apartment. It's super simple, and I wanted to use this to hold up some black cloth I got to use as a backdrop. I did not include the cost of this black cloth and the foam core here because I already owned all that stuff, and you could just use a cardboard box to do the same thing, or tack something up on a wall behind your table wherever you're setting up these light panels. You just need something to hold up your backdrop. There's some other experiments I want to do too, because, you know, back in the day, we tried out taking some photos against using an LED screen as the backdrop, and that actually, putting an image up on the screen, it actually works really well. Now, the light panels have standard micro USB ports on the edge, and dang, look how thin this thing is. It's just thin. All right. The other end of the USB cables are standard USB-A, so I had one of these dual USB-A plug block things laying around, so I use that to plug both panels into it, and I put that block into a 6-foot extension cord that I will keep with this pile of stuff. So I'll keep the extension cord, the USB block, and all the cables to go with the light panels. I'll just keep them all together in a box or something, and then I'll just have this little package that, hey, this is my little lighting setup for when I want to take pictures of miniatures. And so there's 2 of them in the holders. Check it out. Even in portrait mode, my little stands hold them up. That is awesome. I'm guessing these things are around 13 to 14 inches tall, but again, they're so light that the little 4x4.5 stand things I made there hold them up just fine. And I'm really surprised that they don't need any extra weight added. This is very cool. Now, I've used this crazy beach rock to stand miniatures on for quite a while. Sometimes I use a shutdown iPad for its like black mirror surface. But for this test, we'll just use the rock, and I think the rock is too low, so let's stack it on top of a glass jar full of... It's baking soda, man. Come on. It's just baking soda. So let's grab a mini out of the display case. There we go. This is a GW Orc. I painted up probably 6-7 years ago when I first got back into the hobby. And now we're looking through the A7 III, my go-to photography camera, and we're on a 100mm macro lens, but we're too wide. We're too far away from the model. So let me manhandle the tripod and get the camera closer to the miniature. I got to deal with this C-stand that's holding the overhead camera, and there's another tripod. It's just a mess in here right now. Anyway, so yeah, this is it's pretty close to how I normally frame miniatures for photos. Again, I shoot in RAW at the max resolution, so I always end up cropping into the frame for Instagram format, etc. So this whole time I've had my big main light on, the one I'm using right now, in fact. It's right here. This you can see the shadow on my face. It's just a big softbox I have right here, but I'm currently using that, well, in our time dilation here, in the B-roll, I'm using that light just to get the ambient light in the room. So I had to remove the softbox part and put on one of those cone-shaped reflectors, and I've got it aimed at the ceiling, and it's just a big pain in the butt to rearrange for trying to shoot miniatures. Plus, it's not even right for the miniature because it's all top-down light, and you always have to use a bounce card and whatever. This is just one of the things I'm trying to get out of doing with this new setup. So there you go. I turned off the main light, and now we're just seeing what the light panels do. Now, they are not super bright, like I said, by any means. They are pretty dim, but we are going to push them in as close to the miniature as we can. Like, I want them to be just off the edge of the visible frame, like just out of the visible perspective of the camera, right? Of the camera lens. Now, the reason for this is that with any light source, the closer the light source is to the subject, the softer the light is. The further back you go with a light source, the harder the shadows get. And that's with any kind of light. It's just the nature of, how photons work. Now, like I thought, the color of the light coming out of these light panels is pretty crappy. It's a weird color shift. So I'm going into the custom white balance mode on my camera here, and I'm just moving the color shift around until the image vaguely looks close to what the miniature looks like in real life. I can't really dial it in spot on, and I should do a whole thing with putting a white card in there, taking a picture of that, and then the camera would adjust balance automatically, but this is quick and easy for this right now. Now, you might think that, Ignatius has all this fancy camera equipment and stuff, so I can't do that on my cell phone. Like I said, hold that thought. We're gonna get there. Okay, now let's dial in the exposure. I typically shoot miniatures at f9 or higher, specifically trying to get a deeper depth of field, because on a full frame camera, the depth of field is very shallow. So the higher my f-stop number, or the more closed down the aperture is, the deeper the depth of field, and that would be a better shot. But these light panels are pretty dim for that, so even at f9, we're gonna have to take the shot at a half-second shutter speed. Now, what is a half-second shutter speed? It just means that the shutter is going to stay open for half of a second, which is why I have the camera on a tripod. If you took a photo with this shutter speed holding the camera, like if you're holding it in your hand, the image would just be a big blur, because there's going to be shake and tremor in your hand that you're not going to notice, but because the shutter is open for half of a second, it's going to pick up all that stuff. And anyway, probably could show an example of that, but again, I'm lazy. All right, let's take a shot. Now, I have the camera set to take the shot 2 seconds after I push the button, so that the camera has time to settle from me touching it, so there's no tremor in the camera or anything. And let's take another shot at 2/3 of a second shutter speed, which is a tick longer than the previous shot, meaning it lets in more light a little bit. And let's take a shot at 1/3 of a second, which is slightly darker. It'll result in a slightly darker exposure, but not by much, just a little bit shorter of a shutter speed. So now let's try getting a shot with my phone. Now, I got a little holder here that screws onto the same tripod plate the camera was using, but the camera on my phone, which is around, I don't know how old an iPhone 12 is, 6, 7 years old. I guess it's, apparently super duper wide compared to that long macro lens, that telephoto macro lens I was using, right? So let me wrangle this thing up as close as possible to the miniature. The tripod head is now actually touching the table, and it's still too wide. All right, now so let me bring the miniature forward, and we'll bring the light panels forward too. We'll bring everything right up as close as it can get to the edge of the table, and to the camera, to the thing, the tripod holding the phone. And I can bring it, I'm trying to get the miniature as close as it can get to the camera phone and still be within the focus range. Let's see, I'll just take a shot. Maybe I'll look at the different modes it has. I don't know, I never use any of these things. These all suck. They barely change the image. It's not a great phone camera. The phone itself works fine as a phone. That's why I've never upgraded it. It works fine. I don't really rely on it for taking pictures, so it's not a great camera inside this phone. Anyway, here we go. We got a couple of pics. Let me edit one of these right in the phone right now and just see if we can get anything usable out of it, because to be honest, the initial photo here just looks kind of garbage. So I'll crop it into the Instagram format, which is 4:5, and then I guess I'll lower the exposure a bit. I'll take down the brilliance, crush the shadows, and whoa, that's pretty awesome. It totally killed the background. It took it right down into black, which is exactly what I wanted to do. Even on the other camera shots, we're gonna try to crush the background to black. Dude, I don't know, man. Like, that seems to be a pretty nice shot of the miniature. I'm fairly shocked here. Let's take a look at the other camera's shot in Photoshop. Now, this is the darkest exposure one that I took, the one with the 1/3 of a second shutter speed. I'll do some quick tweaks with the saturation and the color balance tools. Again, the color is just kind of wrong because the color output from those light panels is just trash. Anyway, messing with these settings, the exposure looks fine, and you know, let's take a look at this one and the shot from the phone. Let's check them out side by side. So, dang man, I'm pretty shocked at how close they are. Now I can add some color correction to each one of these to get them to sort of match even closer. Here in Final Cut Pro, I'll just throw in some color filters. Yeah, we'll just adjust a few things and I can get them to be pretty close to each other. This is pretty interesting to me. The iPhone's exposure is way brighter at a base level, just because I know it didn't use a shutter speed of 1/3 of a second. It's a pretty decent photo of a miniature. Now don't get me wrong, I definitely prefer the quality of the full frame camera's photo better. There's just a quality to the shallower focus and the quality of the lens and the glass in the lens that just lends to a more three-dimensional feel to the image. But really, for Instagram, the phone shot is totally fine, right? I don't know. Looking at these side by side, I won't necessarily start using the phone as my miniature photo taker, but it's kind of cool to know it's definitely feasible. And with that said, I think these stupid light panels and my little DIY stands are a win. For me anyway. The fact that the color quality is terrible out of these light panels is pretty secondary to the fact that now I have a very easy setup that I can plop down on my painting table. I don't have to rearrange anything, and I can just very quickly snap some shots of miniatures when I need to. And that was my goal. I can't believe that I kind of achieved that with these. Next, I'll have to test out group shots with like full squads or groups of minis. Now that could be a whole different issue because of, well, I don't know. It just depends on how the framing goes with setting up my macro lens on the big camera and how far away the light panels have to be. It'll probably work fine, but actually the phone would probably work best for something like that because the field of view is so wide. So I definitely learned some things today, and I got a successful DIY project out of this thing that will actually be useful. It's just like my foam core airbrush booth. 2 wins. So, I don't know. Pick up a couple of those light panel things. They could come in handy. Or, use a little DIY to make your life easier in the long run. Because making things easier is what it's all about, right? Yes, that's correct. See ya.